I recently got in a little bit of an argument with one of my buddies discussing college football over a few beers. He was talking about the future of the sport and the changing of the tides. Quite literally, we were bringing up Nick Saban leaving Alabama and the tide is changing. And he asked, who are the coaches that you are most excited to see in 2024? And I started naming off coordinators, guys I think are going to have breakout years, guys who I think are going to improve their overall stock. And he said, Cole, I'm talking about head coaches, the face of a program. Silly me. I'm sorry on that one. But I realized I really do want to discuss this, and I have a YouTube show. So why don't I talk about the coaches who are going to pave the way to maybe make a college football playoff and carry an increasingly amount of weight for the team's overall success? Before we do that, if you are new here, welcome on into the channel, people. We talk college football every single day over here, recap in 2023, a look ahead in 2024, conversations such as this. Who are the coaches that everybody should know in the sport? So if this is your daily dose of college football that you need to survive the dreaded offseason, might I recommend that you hit the ring notification and the subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me which coach are you most excited to see in 2024. Not a head coach. Tell everybody about this channel, your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, your best of bros, the drunk dude passed out in a Publix parking lot, college football aficionados, and just fans of the game in general about this place, because we're on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking about our favorite sport. Continue to follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson, Twitter, X, Instagram. It's all the same, people. But that way, conversations surrounding college football never have to stop flowing past this video. So the top coaches to remember. It's so interesting to have conversations with people whenever we discuss coaches, because everyone wants to focus in on the head coach. They're the breadwinners. They're the mainstays. They're the ones who are going to determine if your team is good or not. Not always the case. In fact, I would say more often than not, the assistants really carry a lot of weight, especially in a new world of college football with this CEO mantra approach. So I figured let's go through some of the biggest coordinators and even position coaches. I got a few of them on this list too. Clemson's Garret Riley. He needs a big year. He's a year removed from winning the Broyles Award at TCU. He helped Max Duggan become a Heisman finalist. He led this offense to an average of over 40 points per game, a Big 12 title appearance, and eventually a national championship. And he comes on over, and he is now an outside hire by Dabo Swinney, which was good. It's showing change. It's showing adaptability. And results were kind of mediocre at best. They were finished 9-4 last year, which was a little shocking, but that was largely due to the defense. Their defense is losing over 50% of their production, at least of plug-and-play starters. So you need to see an uptick in consistency. You really have to see what Cade Klubnik can do. This was a top 3 quarterback recruit in 2022. You had high hopes that he was going to come in immediately and kind of have that similar impact of what you thought Quinn Ewers was going to be, what we think Nico Iamaleava is going to be. And he really was kind of a bit of a problem. So what happens if you take an entire offseason and you build off of that? What happens if this is an offense that starts consistently achieving its goals? What if this is an offense that just finds a way to pick up first downs, march inside the red zone, and capitalize? They walk away with 3 points. They walk away with 7 points. But that average of like 21.2 points per game becomes 29.5 or 31.2. Well, in that case, it's very clear to say that as long as your defense isn't giving up play after explosive run, you're at least going to finish in the conversation of top 3 of the ACC. And top 3 of the ACC, guess what? That might be enough to get you in the college football playoff. We have no idea what the playoff is going to look like next season. So Garret Riley is going to carry a lot of weight in that. USC's D'Anton Lynn. Yeah, many people probably don't know this name, but you know his defense. Anybody remember who was one of the best defenses in all of college football last year? UCLA. D'Anton Lynn was the reason why. He has this experience of understanding what it takes to win at the NFL level, and he adapted it now to the collegiate level. And he leaves this offseason and goes from Westwood to Los Angeles, and now he's joining forces with Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley, the brother of Garret Riley, is in for a monumental year. And the reason why is because there are so many people who are going to say right here and right now, he just doesn't have it. What he is as a coach is what works. Because if he's too loyal to people, well, he fired Alex Grinch. Automatic upgrade in that standpoint. He went out and completely rebuilt the entire defensive staff with not only Lynn, but also Matt Entz, North Dakota State's head coach. And I really look at this defensive unit. You just got to be able to be top 50. You know that this offense is going to be humming. Whether they have Caleb Williams, whether they have Miller Moss, whether they lose a guy like Jordan Addison, whether Zachariah Branch is the number one wide receiver, you know that this offense can be humming. But people are looking at USC and saying, well, let's temper our expectations. They are going to the Big Ten after all. What if you just see consistency? What if D'Anton Lynn takes the same players that Alex Grinch had and they're just more consistent? They just find ways to close out games. Let's just say that they're up by 10 going into the fourth quarter and they only allow 3 points instead of 10 or 13 or 14 or 17 or however many it is. Well, now we're talking about USC with an offense that's going to finish top 10 and a defense that's going to finish top 50. You get a top 50 defense from USC with the offensive consistency. Not saying it's possible, but I am saying it's at least plausible that USC is going to be in the conversation to make it to Indianapolis. It's weird to say that, right? Like they're going to be playing in Indianapolis for a Big Ten title. Yeah, just weird. But still, it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially if D'Anton Lynn takes the same method and the same ethics that he had in Westwood and just brings it right across town to the other state and the Trojans. USC is in a good spot. So is LSU with Blake Baker. Baker was actually on staff at LSU when Brian Kelly was hired, and he wasn't retained. And so then he becomes the defense coordinator at Missouri, and Missouri balls out. Missouri is phenomenal defensively. They were top 25 in scoring. They were top 25 in total yards allowed. They were one of the best secondaries, and they lose some players, but the expectation is, well, Baker's here. We're in a good spot. And you remember what happened last season with LSU? Anybody? Number one passing offense, number one scoring offense, number one in total yards. Oh, wait, their defense was a turnstile. Their defense was so bad that literally anybody else comes in, you probably at least go 10-2. You at least are probably in the conversation for a 12-team playoff if that existed. But Mike Denbrock did his job, and you can't say the exact same thing on the other side. So what happens now? You bring back Blake Baker, and they have players. They do. They went out and they added in more 5-star talent, a top 10 recruiting class. They also brought in a few transfers. Harold Perkins. How many people remember this? Harold Perkins last season was the guy for LSU. They weren't talking about Malik Neighbors. They weren't talking about Brian Thomas. They weren't even bringing up Jaden Daniels for Heisman Trophy, but they were bringing up Harold Perkins. And now Baker gets to work with him as a former linebacker and a great linebackers coach. This could be a top 30 defense. Top 30 defense in the SEC with their schedule, with who they have to take on. Are you sure? Seriously, are you sure that LSU, so long as Garrett Nussmeier doesn't hit his stride, is not going to be in the CFP? I think you'd be sadly mistaken. Blake Baker realized Columbia is a great place. Baton Rouge is a little bit better. Brian Kelly realized we're Baton Rouge. We're not Columbia. We can afford to bring in whoever we want. And that's why I think that LSU's defense this year is going to be a major factor on if they make it to the college football playoff. Offensively, they're going to be fine. I get it. You lose Mike Denbrock. You still keep the same personnel. Defensively, how much better can this team be? Texas A&M, another video with Texas A&M mentioned. Colin Klein. Yeah, A&M fans know him well because of Johnny Manziel won the Heisman over him in 2012. A&M fans know him well because of he was a phenomenal quarterback during the 2012 season. And A&M fans better know his name pretty well because if he could be the reason why you're playing for a college football playoff, don't think for one second that Colin Klein, who led Kansas State to a Big 12 title for the first time since 2003, is not a good enough offensive play caller. This is a guy that people gravitate to. I've talked to many people who are on the staff. I've talked to several people at Kansas State. They said one of the key elements that kept this roster so cohesive was the fact that they had a guy who knew Manhattan. He was somebody that you could play for. He was somebody that you wanted to run through a wall with, and he always made you feel like you were getting better. You were improving. Well, what's been the two main problems for Texas A&M the last few years? Number one, offensive line, which isn't going to be Colin Klein's issue. And number two, quarterback, which basically coincide together because the offensive line was bad, quarterback play was bad. They always had to have turnover. Connor Wegman is a 5-star talent. Connor Wegman is one of these quarterbacks that if we talk about December, you're going to be shocked if he leads the SEC in passing yards. You're going to be shocked if he has one of the highest passer ratings, has an average of over 295 yards passing per game, very low interception total. He was on pace last year to have career numbers at A&M, record-setting numbers in College Station. And then an injury occurs, and guess what? He's done for the year. Imagine him fully healthy in an offense that is going to be able to adapt to his strengths. And he's going to have to learn a few things differently, but for the most part, I would feel pretty confident right now. I think Texas A&M is one of those schools where I have to see it to believe it, but I also call them a what-if team. What if Colin Klein gets the best version of a Connor Weichman? What if the offensive line stays healthy? Another version of what if an offense coordinator gets the best version of quarterback, Andy Kolenicki, Penn State's new OC. Well, you know the name. You probably don't remember him at State College because he's been a loyal disciple. So funny how we have these loyal disciples of long-term coaches actually leave and go on their own pathways. Ryan Grubb at Seattle, and now Andy Kolenicki leaves Lance Leipold. He was with him for years at Buffalo, at Kansas. He worked with Jalen Daniels. And so the mobility quarterback is going to be really interesting because Drew Aller's a statue. You are going to say he is basically stuck in molasses. But imagine if he gets the same type of productivity like he got out of Jalen Daniels. Imagine if he gets the same productivity that he got out of Jason Bean last year. Bean played most of the season and they went 9-4. Name the last time that you remember Kansas being bowl eligible in back-to-back years, let alone nearly get to double-digit wins. That's because of Kolenicki. And so for me, what does this offense look like now that you still have a potent run game, which you had in Lawrence with Devin Neal? You have it with Katron Allen. You have it with Nick Singleton. What does this offense look like with at least one decent weapon? You have that with Julian Fleming and a quarterback that many people are kind of putting a little bit of trepidation on. What if I get that version out? Well, we know that Penn State has been going basically 10-2 since God created the earth. What if they get to 11-1? What if this is the year where everything comes together and it's because of Kolenicki? I promise you this, very short list when it comes to offensive hirings in the offseason. Very short list when it comes to teams wanting to go ahead and bring in a new head coach with offensive consistency. You already saw it at Kansas. Imagine if you can do it for Penn State. Imagine if this is the guy that actually sends Penn State to the Big Ten title and maybe even a Big Ten championship. Tony White, another Big Ten name. I honestly thought Tony White was going to be the favorite for the UCLA job. What he did last season was nothing short of witchcraft. Like, I actually would be calling the elders to try and see if they can figure out what's going on inside of his closet, because of it was just baffling to watch how phenomenal Nebraska turned it around defensively. They lost 5 games in 1-score possessions. They were so close to actually beating the narrative about Matt Rule because of all they needed was 2 wins. They get to 7-5 instead of 5-7. What is the expectation going into this year for the Huskers? They have a good defense. They return over 70% of their production. And this offense is going to take a little bit of time because I do think Dylan Raiola is going to start sooner rather than later. Maybe not week 1, but let's just say midway through week 2, he ends up being the starter. It's going to take a little bit of time. But imagine if this defense, the way that they played last season, where every game felt like it was a battle to the final whistle. Imagine if they get that call. Imagine if they turn the corner just a little bit, just a smidge. A 3rd down conversion ends up becoming a 3rd down stop and a punt, and the offense can drive and maybe get into field goal range. What if then? Nebraska is one of the most interesting teams in college football this year because we have no idea what version of the Matt Rule experience we're getting. I think that you're in a lot more positive light because of Tony White is still your defense coordinator. I'm very excited to see what White's going to do in year 2 with this team. I already said we're mentioning position coaches. Jamarcus Shepard, wide receiver coach at Alabama. What did he just do? Like, just look at the last 2 years. That's all I'm going to say. Look at the last 2 years when he was working underneath Kalen DeBoer at Washington as the pass game coordinator. Well, Michael Penix Jr. went off, decided to basically become Goku. You had exceptional play from Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, from Roma Dunze. 2 of those guys are definitely going to be top 50 picks. All 3 of those guys are going to be NFL receivers. Yeah, the number 2 passing attack in all of college football. You had one of the highest scoring offenses in all of college football. You went undefeated as the only undefeated Pac-12 team to make it to the college football playoff. You beat Oregon twice with the defense led by Dan Lanning. Oh, and you went all the way down to the wire against Michigan until you just didn't have enough juice. This is an Alabama roster that the last 2 years has not had a number 1 receiver. Sorry, Jermaine Burton. Sorry, Isaiah Bond. I like you both. I'm an Alabama grad. You didn't have a number 1 roster. It didn't happen that way. What if you get a good wide receivers coach that turns Jeremy Bernard in from not just a good return man, but a great wide receiver? What if you see a guy like Ryan Williams come on in and immediately become the best receiver in the SEC? What if he wins the Biletnikoff in year 1? And now you have Jalen Milroe learning underneath a great a great mind offensively in Kalen DeBoer to play quarterback. What if all this happens? Oh, look, Alabama reveals the mask. Hi, I'm still in the playoff. That's what is basically going to be the conversation. That's it. And so Jamarcus Shepard, in my opinion, carries so much weight because of what he provides in terms of stability and cohesion alongside Kalen DeBoer. I think it could do wonders. Virginia Tech cornerback coach Derek Jones. I am just feeling Virginia Tech. Like, honestly, Hokie fans, you should probably have me come up and visit you guys sometimes because I am riding the hype train of Brent Pry this offseason. Large part, secondary. This was the number 4 defense in pass coverage last year. They held teams to, if I'm not mistaken, roughly around 175 yards per game. 168. My apologies. They were a top 20 defense last year. They're returning the most production in all of college football. And their schedule has a couple trap games, but they also have a couple moments where they should just feel confident, especially with what's returning offensively. Derek Jones has done a phenomenal job working with these young cornerbacks. They're all returning next year. So I look at the Hokies. I look at what they're bringing back defensively. Very hard pressed to say that if they can't get to 8-4, 9-3, this is a roster that drastically underachieved. Derek Jones is going to carry a lot of weight, forcing interceptions. It's a new version of the ACC with quarterbacks like Preston Stone. Anybody know the name? SMU guy? He may end up being the best quarterback in the ACC next year. Kyle McCord, the guy from Ohio State who left willingly, could end up being the best quarterback in the ACC next year. And this could be one of the best defenses in all college football, mainly because of Derek Jones. I mentioned one team already, Clemson, but I would be very hard-pressed not to mention this guy, Matt Luke. Matt Luke is basically what you think of when you mention Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman is a much more, I would say, aggressive leader in the locker room than Matt Luke. But his ability to get exceptional play from the offensive line was phenomenal at Georgia. And then Georgia went on to win national titles without him because if they had Matt Luke. Matt Luke did a great job developing teams when he was at Ole Miss underneath Hugh Freeze. He then took over, wasn't really head coaching material, but the offensive line was sound. The offensive line was great every single year underneath Matt Luke. He turned Laremy Tunsil into an all-pro and a first-round talent. You don't think he can do the same thing? This is Clemson we're talking about. Their offense has to be its backbone this year because the defense is losing so much. Imagine this guy and Chris Rump, who also came on over, great developer of pass rushers. Imagine these two building a relationship alongside Garret Riley, still one of the best offensive minds in the game, and Dabo Swinney, who, until proven otherwise, is a top 10 coach in college football. Imagine if this team just does the same as they always do, but they upgrade at coaches. Well, that's Dabo's excuse to not utilize the transfer portal. That's Dabo's excuse not to utilize the NIL collective. Just go ahead and pay for better coaches for better results for your team. That's the way I view this one. If Matt Luke does what he did during his time at Georgia in Clemson, this is going to be a Tigers team that once again is right back in the college football playoff hunt. Don't ask me about this. You can ask yourself about this. You know that that's going to happen. But those are the coaches that I'm monitoring this year. I think it'd be very hard-pressed not to include Garret Riley. D'Anton Lynn in the Big Ten is going to be such fire for the future. Blake Baker, get your popcorn ready. Lane Kiffin, you're going to have to go up against him. Colin Klein at Texas A&M, Andy Kolonicki, Tony White, Jamarcus Shepard, Derek Jones, Matt Luke, all these guys, difference makers from the jump, all these guys could be staples and reasons why their teams are going to the CFP. Make sure you comment below who is your favorite coach that you're looking to monitor this season. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single thing that we're doing here over on Just Saying It. Continue to follow me on social media, Twitter, X, Instagram. Slide in the DMs. I love answering your questions at Mr. Cole Thompson. Make sure that you also tell everybody about this channel, including the drunk dude passed out in a Waffle House parking lot. And until next time, I'm Cole Thompson, folks. Later.